achieved.
Despite all the fanfare and the build-up and how enjoyable it was, and I've already expressed my opinion with, my views on the pointlessness of that fight outside of just making money, which is totally fine, I guess, I'm starting to lose patience with Conor McGregor. I was a much bigger fan of Conor McGregor than of Nate Diaz prior to this fight. And now I've certainly flip-flopped on that. I like Nate. It's just, not just about as much as I did before. I just like Conor less. It's rubbing me the wrong way, the way he goes about things. He's the UFC's featherweight champion, and yet for some reason he feels that is beneath him, that there are bigger and better things to do elsewhere other than defend his title. The man he took the title from in 10 seconds, or however long that I predicted him to knock out, defended that title, there were injuries, but defended the title for a number of years against a number of opponents. Conor McGregor has yet to defend a title in his professional career. Whether it be in the UFC, whether it be in Cage Warriors, he has yet to defend his title, and I don't like that. He's looking for other things. I don't know, is he afraid to lose the title? He knows as long as he has it, he is a champion. And that's a mentality I think it's something that probably scares him, because if he loses Jose Aldo in the rematch, suddenly he's no longer a champion, so it's a big hit. Do the right thing, defend your title, or vacate it and fight for the lightweight title. That's fine with me, but do something. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC on Fox 21 event, which will feature Demian Maia taking on Carlos Condit in the main event, a welterweight scrap. And it will go down on August 27th. I will have all 4 main card predictions for you on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I believe there are 7, as they just yanked one of the Fight Pass fights from the card. I don't think they'll replace it on this short of notice. Nonetheless, if they do, I will do my best to break it down. I'm coming off an 8-4 night. Obviously, I had Nate Diaz to win that fight, which I felt he did. I felt Conor ran away too much. And obviously, it was a good first round for Conor and a good start at the second round. But I felt Nate took over in the third, or took over the second, won the third, and probably won the fifth as well. But obviously, the judges saw it differently, and a lot of people saw it differently, and I can see why. Absolutely. It's not like it's a robbery by any stretch of the imagination. I just felt Nate did enough. Coming up an 8-4 night, I've had a number, I'm on a sizable slump when it comes to picking main events. So we'll see if we can change that today. The bet packs, I had 2 miss out by 1 leg each. That was disappointing. They were very close. I felt very strongly about their ability to cash. Again, they'll be up for sale for this show, $12. Get in, hit it while it's hot. I'm looking to rebound. My props were on fire last show. I had a number of very strong props. They did very well, so make sure you check those out. My DraftKings picks were okay. And you can always subscribe and save. You're usually getting yourself maybe a card and a half free if you subscribe for the rest of August and September. And without further ado, we've got 4 pretty fun fights. Let's get to that first one. Our first fight on the main card takes place in the UFC's lightweight division, and it is a rematch as Joe Lauzon, 26-12-0, battles Jim Miller with a current record of 26 wins, 8 losses, and 1 no contest. This is a rematch from a UFC 155 match, which Jim Miller won by decision. It was a fight of the night bonus winner. Since their first meeting, Miller's gone 4-4 with 1 no contest, which was a loss to Pat Healy. He has lost 2 of his last 6 overall, and for Lauzon, he's gone 4-3 with a 2-2 record over his last 4 matchups. And it's kind of interesting if you look at look at some of the fights surrounding this. It's almost like we've had a mini round robin tournament of sorts. There's a circular swirling ball of matchups, as we had Miller beating Joe Lauzon, followed by Diego Sanchez beating Takanori Gomi, then Joe Lauzon beating Takanori Gomi, and Diego Sanchez beating Jim Miller, then Jim Miller beating Takanori Gomi, and Joe Lauzon beating Diego Sanchez, which both took place at UFC 200, and now we have Miller and Lauzon fighting again where we all started back. I thought you'd like to know that. Physically, Lauzon 2 inches taller, same reach at 71 inches. Lauzon is the younger man by a single year. Both guys overall very dangerous grapplers. We're well aware of what these guys bring to the table. Lauzon 18 submission wins on his career. Miller has 13. The rest of the records, Lauzon does have 7 wins by knockout. He is, including his stoppage of Diego Sanchez, which was damn impressive. He is 1-4 on the scorecards and has been finished 7 times. For Jimmy Miller, 9-5 on the scorecards, has been finished 3 times. Well, I believe he has a trio of wins by knockout. In the first fight, Miller came out pushing hard very early, was very aggressive, landing a lot of good, strong combinations, highlighted by a hard right hook that he was landing on Lauzon and backing him up. Miller also landed some very nice inside leg kicks, which is one of his better weapons to take away Lauzon's balance. Overall, he was very aggressive. He was closing the distance and landing those short punches on the inside as well. Landed some good elbows in close, busted Lauzon wide open. It was like a freaking horror show the way he had him busted up. Big question right off the bat is, can Miller still carry a pace like that several years later? Is that what he's capable of doing? Continuing on with how that match went down, Lauzon started landing a nice uppercut. He was landing some knees as Jim moved in close. But again, Lauzon was constantly bleeding. His ability to compete was very much compromised early on. We saw an early takedown by Jim Miller in round 2. First takedown attempt by either guy. He held some top control. Eventually, he went for a submission, which Miller is known for doing, is going for submissions, and it didn't work out. And eventually he wound up on his back. He used rubber guard to neutralize Lauzon, but again, Miller spent some time on his back. We saw Joe attempt a couple of submissions and eventually start to rally in the third round, landing some solid lefts. Both guys were slowing down, but Lauzon kind of turned the fight. It was just simply too late. Statistically, Miller landed 91 significant strikes in that matchup, the best of his UFC career, bar none. Since that fight, the best he's put up was 56 in his loss to Diego Sanchez. His output has certainly dropped off. It's not there as it was in that fight. Now, it could have been styles. We know Lauzon's had some issues with that. Overall, Lauzon is 2. I talk about this relentlessly, but Lauzon is 2-5 in his career when his opponent eclipses 50 significant strikes landed, so it's kind of a key. He is 1-5 in the last 6 fights where he has not landed a takedown. His only win coming in the Diego Sanchez matchup where he knocked him out before a takedown was required. So it's kind of skewed those numbers a little bit. But you see some of the stats that talk about what Lauzon brings to the table. When you look at with Jim Miller on the other side of things, prior to the Takanori Gomi victory, which again was over very quickly, Miller had given up 2 takedowns against Diego Sanchez, 2 against Michael Chiesa, and 2 against Beneil Dariush. Against Danny Castillo, he actually landed 2 takedowns but spent some time on his back after getting reversed. So you see what I'm driving at there. Miller is a very opportunistic grappler, but he will relinquish position for submission, which can be concerning. He had success early against Michael Chiesa and had some good positions. If he gets put on his back, he's a very active guard, likes to use that rubber guard. But, eventually, like in the Chiesa fight, he was overwhelmed on the floor, beat up, busted up with some big shots, and eventually submitted. It kind of reminded me very much of the Pat Healy fight, where he simply got outworked by the bigger man on the mat and eventually, succumbed to the impact of the damage. Lauzon on the feet, he needs to use that straight right, which is an excellent counter for Miller, who is a southpaw. He also needs to land those kicks because Miller will be open to those. And we've seen Lauzon have some solid flashes of brilliance with his striking. Joe is at his best when he can cut off the cage and swarm his opponents. He did it against Diego Sanchez. He was very accurate. He had a left hook, which hurt him a couple of times. When he can close his distance behind his strikes and attack in close, land those knees, land those elbows, land those short punches, he can be very effective. Where he has trouble, as I already mentioned, is with combination strikers. Evan Dunham was landing big combinations. Miller had success there. We also saw Al Iaquinta and Michael Johnson have similar success. Iaquinta actually finished Lauzon. Johnson made him look silly. He tends to shell up and gets hit with a lot of shots, and the damage piles up, and he can't return fire. He wants to brawl. He wants to brawl with a guy and just get in there and swing at close quarters, not go and have a technical fight. Lauzon is 3-4 in his last 7 fights to go out of the first round. Not great numbers. But Jim Miller's 1-4 in fights to go out of the first round, with his only win coming over Danny Castillo, which was a split decision. So that suggests that both these guys are having trouble convincing the judges they've done enough if they can't finish their opponent. Miller isn't nearly as durable as he used to be. He's been stopped a couple of times recently. I don't think his cardio is nearly as good. We saw that especially against Diego Sanchez. But he is still as reckless. He still takes chances, and that is concerning. I don't think Miller's going to have the volume he had in the last fight. He's not going to have the combination striking. He's not quite as tight with his striking as he used to be. He's not going to do that early damage that really kind of shut down Lauzon, put him on his back foot early. I think Lauzon's going to pressure him early, capitalize on those mistakes that Jim Miller likes to doesn't like, but tends to give up on the ground. Look for Lauzon to hurt Jim on the feet and transition to the mat game, where he'll use ground and pound to open him up and eventually lock in something. My prediction is Joe Lauzon to defeat Jim Miller by submission. Fight number 2 on the main card takes place in the women's strawweight division as top 10 ranked, actually it's number 10 actually, Paige, 12 gauge, Paige VanZant, 6-2, battles the rowdy one, not Ronda, but Bec Rawlings of Australia with a current record of 7 wins and 4 losses. Now this is a return bout for Paige after her loss to Thug Rose and her stint, her actual loss in the finals of Dancing with the Stars. She hasn't competed in 8 months. Lots of eyes are coming on her, especially being on Fox. The UFC strategically did that to make sure they draw attention. There's a lot of pressure on Paige to get back and have a good performance. For Bec Rawlings, she's coming off a win over Sohee Ham. She actually has back-to-back wins. She's building some momentum. She isn't the most liked fighter out there, but you don't have to be liked to be successful. Rawlings comes from a kickboxing background, 1-1 in fights ended by knockout, 4-0 in fights ended by submission, 2-3 in the scorecards. For VanZant, training out of a Team Alpha Male, BJJ Blue Belt, 1-0 in fights ended by knockout, 2-1 submission, 3-1 decision. So both girls still very early in their MMA careers. Rawlings, 2 inches taller than Paige. Paige will have a 1-inch reach advantage, and Paige is the younger girl by 5 years. Now looking at what Beck does well, she's a decent striker. She has a nice uppercut. She'll follow it up with left and right hooks, trying to swarm her opponents. She'll also look for a push kick from distance. What I don't like is she tends to lead with her face when she's moving forward behind punches, which can open her up to getting countered. Heather Jo Clark had some success landing short, straight punches as she came in and really teeing off on her at times. Also, Beck has this tendency to have some periods of inactivity before engaging. She kind of sits at range and looks for openings and just kind of sits there and lulls her opponent into a false sense of security. But if they're working and throwing strikes, they're winning the exchanges. And because of that, she was allowing Ham in that last fight, to sit, take the center of the cage, and back her up. And that's that's a positive. When nothing's going on, at least if you're looking like the aggressor, that's something. I know we've changed the judging criteria, but still, that's something. Beck was also struggling with the hand speed of Ham and the volume. She was also finding issues having a range despite being the longer fighter. Where she has had success, and we saw a little bit in that matchup, is clinch and dirty, clinch up and use that dirty boxing. Short uppercuts against Lisa Ellis. She hurt her on the inside with a knee in the clinch and led to the eventual submission victory. And that's something she could look for here. She will attempt throws in the clinch position. She has lost position in the past. And in scramble, she's not the greatest scrambler, which certainly is concerning. She did get Ham's back, but eventually lost that position in a scramble. So certainly concerning against a fighter like Paige VanZant. Additionally, she's had some issues on the mat. She was taken down by Heather Jo Clark. Carla Esparza used her ground game to defeat her on the show. And I believe Tisha Torres... so she had similar issues against Esparza, and I believe Torres beat her as well when they fought when Torres filled in. Esparza beat her. I believe it was for the inaugural Invicta title back in the day. Also, the cardio of Beck, big question mark. And you can probably tell why I'm highlighting these things. She was breathing very hard in round 2 and started to slow down in round 2 against Ham. Very tired in round 3, plodding forwards, was getting overwhelmed at times against the cage, took advantage of a couple of mistakes by her opponent, kind of gutted that round out, but certainly not a strong performance in that third round. And why is that significant? Well, Paige VanZant carries an absolutely relentless pace. She keeps pushing forward. She works exceptionally hard, especially once she gets in the clinch where she's just wanting to overwhelm and exhaust her opponent. She will throw knees, elbows, punches, will work takedowns from the clinch. She will eat some big shots. We saw Felice Herrig hurt her a couple of times, or at least land some decent shots in close, but Paige is willing to eat those shots to land her own and simply say, I'm going to land more often, and eventually you're going to have to go on the defensive because of the front I'm bringing forward. One thing Paige likes to do is she'll go for those takedowns in the clinch. That headlock takedown modified throw, we saw Randa Marcos do it, and it cost her positional, and it cost her the fight. It can result in opponents taking her back. We have seen Paige, and that was one of my keys when I talked about if she was going to attempt stuff like that against Rose, it simply wasn't going to work and was going to result in a detrimental swing. Paige is still young. She's still trying to round out what she does well. She's very aggressive on the mat. She'll look for back takes. It can cost her positionally, but she keeps working and can get back up, work her way out of bad positions, and, again, she goes back with her volume to make up for that positional deficit. Look for her to land body lock takedowns. She does a nice job passing the leg and just keeps chipping away with strikes until her opponent opens up and she can go with something bigger. When she fought Thug Rose, she got completely out-wrestled and outclassed on the mat and dominated, eventually submitted. She found no success with her own takedowns, only had a chance to attempt a couple and went 0 for 2, where Rose went 8 for 10, which is darn remarkable prior to the submission. As far as Paige's striking is concerned, it's still a work in progress. It's mainly clinch-based striking or punches meant to help her close the distance. She landed 10 significant strikes against Rose. That's how big of a washout it was. Prior to that, 73, 67, and 61 in other 3 UFC fights. So she's capable of putting up big numbers again at close range. As I said, Paige is still developing. I expect to see improvements coming into this fight, and coming off that last loss, it kind of serves as it's her first UFC loss, so it's kind of a rebound-type fight. The Dancing with the Stars thing, could it prove to be a distraction? Could it prove to be a point where it helps her to develop and mature as an individual, as a competitor? Quite possibly. But for Beck Rawlings in this fight, for her to win this fight, she needs to keep at distance, but really push the activity, something beyond what we've seen in the past, and that's probably not going to be the case. If she can do that, and the fight, if she can't keep her at distance, she needs to capitalize on Paige's mistakes when they go to the floor. If Paige takes it down, goes for a move, and Beck can get a better position out of it, she has to make that count. I expect Paige to have a few close calls early on, have a few issues early on, but eventually she's going to overwhelm Beck. She'll probably have her tired in round 2. That speed, that pace is going to be too much for Rawlings to take advantage of. The pressure on the inside is going to be overwhelming for the Aussie to deal with, and eventually Paige wears her out, gets her in position, and my prediction is Paige VanZant to defeat Beck Rawlings. I'll take Paige by decision. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's featherweight division as the former UFC lightweight champion, former WEC lightweight champion, the last WEC ever knew, Anthony Showtime Pettis, 18-5-0, makes his divisional debut against the 6th-ranked Charles do Bronx Oliveira with a current record of 21 wins, 5 losses, and 1 no contest. Now, Pettis, as I said, former lightweight champion, he's cutting to featherweight for the first time to try and restart his career. He had talked about going down to challenge Jose Aldo, and Aldo talked about coming up to challenge him at lightweight. Now, Pettis appears to be making the move simply to stay relevant. He has lost 3 fights in a row, dating back to losing his title to Rafael dos Anjos. His last win, UFC 181, back in 2014. That's a long time. For Oliveira, he's coming off a win over Miles Jury, who was also cutting down from 155 pounds. His only loss in his last 5 fights came against Max Holloway due to that fairly freak injury, which is very unfortunate because I was very much looking forward to that fight. And I picked Oliveira to win. Who knows if he would have? I would have liked to see it played out, though. Oliveira also formerly fought at 155 pounds. He has missed weight in 2 of his last 4 matchups, including for the jury fight, and 3 of his last 8. So certainly, if he misses weight here with the new weigh-in issues, or the changes to the weigh-ins, which are creating a lot of issues, he could miss weight again here. It certainly could deplete his ability to compete. Both men are 5'10", 2-inch reach advantage for Pettis. Oliveira is 2 years younger. And activity-wise, Pettis, 3 fights in 2016, which is shocking for a guy who had so many issues. He could actually get a 4th in if this goes well and goes quickly. He had just one in each of 2014 and 2015. So certainly upping that activity level. We'll see if it hasn't been a positive so far. We'll see if he can turn it around. Pettis, 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo, BJJ brown belt, 7 wins by knockout, 8 wins by submission. He has never been finished, but a very concerning 3-5 on the scorecards. As far as what he brings to the table, lots of kicks. He has excellent leg dexterity coming from that Taekwondo background. I sometimes question his fight IQ. I've seen him throw kicks in fights where fighters are looking to close the distance, get a hold of him and take him down, and it's resulted in him being taken down, but still, he's a very capable fighter. That head kick knockout of Joe Lauzon was brutal, so was the body kick stoppage of Donald Cerrone. But besides those stoppages, it seems like a lot of his techniques don't have a ton of power behind them. I'm not saying they're not dangerous and he can't knock guys out with them, but it seems like it's just, if he doesn't knock a guy out, he comes off as kind of a point fighter. He can strike while moving backwards, he can do a lot of things, but unless he lands that one big blow, he's not going to pile up a ton of damage, if you know what I'm saying. Hopefully he proves me wrong in this fight, for his sake at least. He has had issues in the past with gritty fights. He needs time to attack and set up his offense. Gilbert Melendez absolutely mauled him in the opening round of that title fight before getting caught. Dos Anjos did it for 5 rounds. We saw Eddie Alvarez outwork him for 3 rounds. I picked Alvarez to defeat him. Edson Barboza outworked him and did a lot of damage as well. Another fight I picked correctly. So we've seen Pettis struggle with those matchups. He is 1-4 in his last 5 decisions. So his decision record is certainly taking a hit. His only win a split over Jeremy Stevens. As he lost the first round against Gill, before getting the submission. He finished Lauzon and Cerrone early, and Benson Henderson quickly as well. I don't think his style translates that well, and I've said this before, it does not translate that well to longer fights. He tends to be a bit of a front runner. He's the type of guy who does well when he's able to clearly pull ahead. He's clearly better than his opponent. But in a fight where he has to make adjustments and dig down and come up with stuff, and his opponent's not going to just stand there and be like, "You're Anthony Pettis, you're going to beat me," it seems like he struggles. Against Eddie Alvarez, he just seemed hesitant to pull the trigger at times. He was landing some decent strikes, but Alvarez was just doing more, getting off first. As I said before the Ed Barboza fight, his last 3 losses, takedowns were a big factor. He gave up 20 takedowns overall. Taken down by Eddie Alvarez early, he was getting pushed into the cage and really struggled creating separation. Enter Charles Oliveira. This gentleman is a fantastic grappling machine. A magician on the mat, if you will. He flows between his grappling and his striking back and forth. Doesn't let his opponent rest, and he has no fear as far as, I'll kick, I'll throw a flying knee, because if you take me down, I'm happy to be there. You're not happy to be there with me. He also will jump submissions from anywhere. In the clinch, anywhere he can get a hold of you, he will go for it. Grab that guillotine standing, start to pull on opponents into his control. He'll start looking for legs and arms and anything he can attack to, look for that finish. One thing I love what he does is he'll attack a knee in the clinch, and as soon as the opponent doubles over, whether it be to defend or whether it be because of the pain, he grabs their head, pulls down, and starts looking for that submission. Starts to crank on it. I think that's how he caught Nick Lentz in that fight. And we've also seen him improve. He's also becoming a better wrestler. We saw him take down Jeremy Stevens, who's not an easy guy to take down by any stretch of the imagination, so his wrestling's improving. As I said, he dropped Nick Lentz with a knee to the body and eventually finished him, has good elbows in close, some decent leg kicks. He kept up with Frankie Edgar for a full 5 rounds, I believe it was. Was it 5 or 3? Never mind. But he kept up with Frankie Edgar using good pace, volume, footwork, bloodied Frankie's nose a couple of times. He wore out Nick Lentz, who's a very tough and grinding grappler. He absolutely wore him out with pressure and transitions between that grappling and that striking. His Muay Thai is solid, and he wore out Lentz and eventually submitted him. I like the way Oliveira ties up limbs on the mat. He's constantly advancing position in sequence. He will give up position for submission, but he's very capable of working his way out of that bad spot. The other thing I like the way he does, he likes to bait his opponent into traps that he sets to get his submissions going. As Miles Jury stood up, it looked like Jury was going to get out of a bad position, and boom, as Oliveira transitioned from the back to that guillotine and finished that fight. There is a question about the durability of the Brazilian. He has been hurt in previous fights and stopped. Cerrone stopped him at lightweight. Cub Swanson knocked him out. Obviously, that injury we saw suffered against Max Holloway. Those guys all hit hard. No question about those guys hit hard, but still, it's certainly something on the mind. If Pettis tags him with something big, is he just going to fold up shop? Actually, Nick Lentz hurt him early on as well. The cut to 145, I think, is going to be too much for Anthony Pettis. He didn't seem like he had a lot to cut. It's not like he had excess body fat like a Diego Sanchez that looks like he could get down. The speed and volume at lightweight was an issue. It's going to be a bigger issue at featherweight. The power, if it translates well for Pettis, it could help him out there. But considering he has a positive 0.09 striking differential, the volume is not there for him to win decisions. He has to win this fight by knockout. He's not going to submit Charles Oliveira, and I struggle to see him winning a decision based on Oliveira's submission game, his grappling game, and his volume. Oliveira's going to push him. He's going to test that cardio. That first round could be a little bit tight, but the constant submission threats and constant transitions from Oliveira is going to overwhelm Pettis. The takedowns will be there for Oliveira if he can commit to it and goes for it. He might very well pull guard and pull Pettis into that position. I think eventually we see Pettis tire down and Oliveira catches him, and my prediction is Charles Oliveira to defeat Anthony Pettis by submission. I'm giving you guys longer predictions. There's just 4 fights in the main card, so why not? Main event time, we are in the welterweight division for a fight that actually matters to the welterweight division, as the 4th-ranked former middleweight title challenger, Demian Maia, 23-6-0, takes on the 5th-ranked former interim UFC champion, former WEC champion, the natural-born killer, Carlos Condit, with a current record of 30 wins and 8 defeats. Now, the winner of this fight is probably looking at a shot at the title versus the winner of Woodley and Wonderboy Thompson. Or at least they're very much in the mix. I would love to see it. You don't know how things are going to go. You don't know what Dana White's going to do and the powers that be, how they're going to make these decisions, because that's just what they do. Condit is coming off a title fight loss versus Robbie Lawler. He is 2-4 in his last 6 fights. He has talked about retiring. That title fight letdown is a real thing, and it could be a factor here. For Demian Maia, flip side, he has won 5 fights in a row, including submission wins over Neil Magny and Matt Brown, 2 talented fighters. He dominated a couple of very good prospects in Ryan LaFleur and Gunnar Nelson, and he is hungry. He wants that shot at the title. Physically, Condit 1 inch taller, he'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and he is 7 years younger. That's check in favor of the American. Now, you're looking at Carlos Condit's numbers: 15-1 in fights ended by knockout. The only knockout, that Tyrone Woodley injury, which was bullshit. 13-3 in fights ended by submission. 2-5 on the scorecards, though. So that could be an area of vulnerability for the natural-born killer. Maia 3-1 in fights ended by knockout. That brutal knockout against Nate Marquardt, the only one there. 11-0 in fights ended by submission. Not surprising. 9-5 on the scorecards. Now, Condit, this is going to come as a shock to a lot of people here. He wants to keep this fight standing. Yeah, I know. He's a very capable grappler, but he has 0 submission wins since 2008. He hasn't shown a great amount of offensive wrestling, even though he did take down Thiago Alves a couple of times. But you're not submitting Demian Maia unless you're Jake Shields, who is able to get on top and hold that position. You are not out grappling Demian Maia. Sorry, Carlos, don't do it. What Carlos needs to do, he has massive power. Be in a position to land it. He has a ton of weapons to land it with, so that's also a positive. 176 strikes versus Robbie Lawler, 151 against Nick Diaz. He can put up some huge numbers. He can outwork you, and he can knock your ass out. Those are 2 quality things Carlos Condit has going for him. Excellent cardio. He can maintain his pace start to finish. He is durable and capable of digging deep. He finished Rory McDonald late in that matchup, which was actually in Vancouver. Against Johnny Hendricks, he opened up on Hendricks as he was tiring in the 3rd round and had his greatest success there. Now, mind you, he's coming off a fight where probably the 5th round decided it, and I thought he won the fight against Robbie Lawler, won the title. Of course, the judges didn't see it that way. I picked him to win, so obviously I'm biased a little bit. But that 5th round probably gave it to Robbie Lawler, and that's something Carlos, how is the impact of that war? What has that done to him? It can take a lot out of a fighter. It certainly took a lot out of Robbie Lawler, if you want to say that, based on the Woodley fight. Nonetheless, when he fought Johnny Hendricks, he was getting swarmed early by Hendricks and put on the mat. He dealt with the pressure by landing some good counters, including some counter knees, but the fact of the matter is he lost that because he couldn't stay off his back. He will mix up his strikes, kicks, and punches, throws a lot of knees and kicks, and then comes with 2-3 punch combinations after. Question is, will he throw kicks versus getting taken down? Does that take away a big part of his arsenal? It's a good question mark. If Maia gets a hold of him, he's going to put him on the mat. He will use his punches to set up kicks and vice versa, which is an effective way to deal with guys who are looking to grab onto a limb and take you down. He dropped GSP with a head kick. He'll go anywhere and target anywhere. It's the knees in the clinch. Spinning elbow, let those solid elbows on the inside. He knocked at Alves with a short combination. The guy is lethal. But again, we go back to what I said before. Big takedown numbers for the people that have either beaten Carlos Condit or at least had a large amount of success. 12 for Johnny Hendricks, 7 for George St. Pierre. Martin Kampmann in their 2 fights landed 11. Rory McDonald almost beat him, landed 3. Tyrone Woodley landed 3 prior to the freak leg injury. Carlos can get off his back and work back to a vertical base, absolutely. But it's getting taken down and held there for a while that hurts, and he's never faced a smothering top position grappler like Demian Maia. Maybe George St. Pierre, but Maia is on a whole other level when it comes to top position grappling, or off his back for that matter. Maia, what he wants to do, he wants to get this fight to the ground. Again, another shocking, revelation. He looks to close that distance, grab onto his opponent, and drag them to the mat. Pull guard if he has to, rotate to back mount. He'll do whatever he has to do. We saw against Rick Story. They were standing, he rotated to back mount, locked in that face-crushing submission that splooged blood out of his nose. It was violent, and it got the job done. Maia averages 2.96 takedowns per fight at a 31% completion rate. Those aren't impressive numbers, but it's because he just keeps shooting. He's relentless. 1 takedown fails, he keeps coming forward. He had 3 against Brown, 2 against Gunnar Nelson, 5 against Ryan LaFleur. He has landed 30 takedowns in his 10 welterweight fights. That's 3 takedowns per fight, and the thing is, think about it, he lands one in the round, and he's staying there for a large portion of that round, if not the full 5 minutes or however long is left on the clock once he gets you down. As I said, he keeps driving. He will shoot or draw you into the clinch. Only 2 fighters, though, overall have had success beating him at welterweight. Shields was getting taken down, was able to counter to top position. That was big. Jake Shields is a fantastic grappler. Whether you like him or hate him, he's a fantastic grappler. Jake the Snake, if you will. Rory spent the first round on his back before Maia tired. Rory was able to get off his back long enough to win that fight in rounds 2 and 3. Cardio issues have been a big deal for Demian Maia. Can he go a full 5 rounds against Carlos Condit, who is known for rallying late? He did it against Ryan LaFleur. LaFleur is not nearly as dangerous a fighter on the feet as Carlos Condit. We saw him do it against Matt Brown, took him out late. But in that fight, in the 3rd round, Maia came out tired. Again, 3 rounds, not 5. Flopped to his butt after a failed shot attempt to start the 3rd round, and Brown jumped on him, tried to land some strikes, got drawn into the grappling exchange, and eventually finished. When he fought LaFleur, he was still moving very well in rounds 4 and 5, and did a good job of just avoiding, used a lot of movement and avoided confrontation until the moment was right to spring in, get a hold of him, take him down. That's something he's going to have to do against Carlos Condit in this fight if it does go that long. The title fight letdown scenario is a legit thing. We've seen a lot of fighters, Holly Holm, for example, just fight flat after losing. They've been to the top of the mountain. They're kind of starting over, or at least they know how. Certainly Carlos Condit, he knows how close he was to being the champion. He basically suggested he was done after losing that fight. So certainly there are issues there. For Maia, he's still hungry. He wants that shot at the welterweight title. He's already had a shot at the middleweight title. It was a piss poor fight. Not his fault. Well, it was his fault for not executing, but nonetheless, he's fighting a great fighter. He wants a shot at the welterweight title. Always, Condit is always a threat of landing the knockout, either early on, just in an exchange, or because Maia gets exhausted. Look for those flying knees. But the thing is, every time Maia gets a hold of you, and even Hendricks was able to catch a flying knee and take him out, every time Maia gets a hold of a fighter, he's putting him on their back. I think Maia makes a statement here. I think he takes Condit down. I think he eventually rotates to back position, and Condit's been submitted 3 times, not in recent memory, but I think Maia's going to do it. So my prediction is Demian Maia to defeat Carlos Condit by submission, most likely a rear naked choke, but I got Maia by submission in a small upset based on